Three. Hi, thank you all so much for joining our first first faculty career impact session this fall. My name is Helen Wu. I am the Senior Director overseeing Thunderbird Career Management Center. Really excited that we get to do this again this term. And I want to give special thanks for Sierra. She's our second year student. She's the one that's coordinating with all the professors regarding schedules, making all these sessions happen. Thank you, Sierra. Just want to set the expectation regarding the faculty career impact session. So the goal of the program really is to invite different professors to share with you all regarding their area of expertise, maybe a little bit of their personal career journey as well. I know quite a few of you joining Thunderbird because either you want to change career or you don't really want to do with your life, or you want to do so many different things, you want to start your own company. There are just so many opportunities. So our goal is to invite our professors, maybe brainstorm a little bit with you, and hopefully that could help you clarify in terms of what you want to do after Thunderbird. And today I'm really excited to introduce you our professor, Henrik Scheel. He is a father. He's a Danish national, lives in Silicon Valley right now. He is a lifestyle entrepreneur. I've watched so many of his videos on YouTube, obsessed right now. Really excited to learn a little bit more from you, Professor. Thank you so much. Take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I look forward to a good conversation on career planning, and I can share my perspective sort of as life as an entrepreneur, consultant, and now professor of practice. I'm with Thunderbird in a part-time capacity because my main sort of gig is to start and run new businesses. I also do a fair amount of corporate consulting where I focus on corporate entrepreneurship and innovation management. So happy to sort of dive into any of those topics, and as Helen has discovered, there are quite a few videos of me out there talking about what it means to have an entrepreneurial mindset, and where I share a bit about my career story, so happy to share some of those links as well. For those of you who joined a bit late, there is a in the chat you can access a Miro board. And Miro is a digital whiteboarding tool. And I created this little Miro board here for us. You can see people are zooming around, introducing themselves. So you can introduce yourself here on the board if you like, where we can get to learn a little bit about you. On the right-hand side, the way this works is initially you can turn people's cursors off if that's confusing, right up here. And on the left-hand panel here, initially you might have a cursor that looks like a hand. And that's in viewing mode, so you can't actually interact with anything. So you just click this little sort of arrow icon, and now you can zoom in just using your trackpad, or at the bottom right corner you can zoom in and out. There's a map function here too that you can use to sort of navigate around the board here. So I set up a couple of fun little questions for you. Would you rather be impactful, famous, or rich? And you can take a little dot here, you can double click on it and write your initials in here, and then you could put it somewhere, or you can do it anonymously, whatever you like. I would be probably not famous, but impactful and well off would be my preference. And then a couple of other things, you can rank your level of confidence right now in terms of how to be successful. And then for those of you who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs, maybe you can find a co-founder today if you share some of your ideas of problems you'd like to work on, or ideas you already have that you'd like to work on. And then I will be monitoring the Q&A session down here. So the way this works, you just take a sticky, move it over, double click on it, and so here, so now you can write your questions here, and if you like other people's questions, you can click on it and you can add a little emoji and give it a thumbs up, and then I'll make sure to answer those top questions. All right, enough about Miro. Feel free to check it out, or don't. You're also welcome to just jump in at any point of time. What I think might be most productive with our session here today is that I'll give a very brief overview of my career path, and then I really hope to just jump into a Q&A to hear what kind of considerations, concerns, perspectives you have on next step for all of you. It's such an exciting time to be alive. Never before in history have we seen such rapid societal transformation, right? We have the fourth industrial revolution. We have all these exponential tech trends that are rapidly disrupting all different industries. So really, no matter what career path you choose, you don't have a choice. You need to be an entrepreneur, in my perspective. So no matter what career path you choose, you have to have this mindset of an entrepreneur. You have to be agile, to be ready to change, and to be an effective problem solver. So that's why I enjoy teaching entrepreneurship, because I think it's such an important life skill. No matter whether you want to pursue a career in public service, in an NGO, in a large corporation, or you want to start your own business, whether that's a social entrepreneurship endeavor or a for-profit company, having the mindset and the tools and tactics to solve problems in an efficient way is just such a fundamental skill for everyone. And that's what entrepreneurship is all about. We solve problems. We are good at sort of utilizing empathic listening to understand people's problems. And that's a good skill, whether you're good at understanding what your boss might need from you, or what your family and friends might need from you, or in the case of an entrepreneur, you need to be good at understanding what your customers might need from you, so that you can identify a real problem that people experience. You can come up with lots of great innovative ideas on how to solve that problem. And then we dive into business modeling and testing business models, and ultimately learning how to pitch and present your idea. So Shara is one of my students right now, and she's going through all this craziness. So she can tell you about what that entrepreneurial roller coaster is all about in the course. But I started out as a student in Denmark. So I grew up in this tiny little country in Northern Europe, 5.5 million people. How many of you have been to Denmark? Anyone? Nobody's been to Denmark.
I have. I've been to Denmark.
Leslie's been to Denmark. Hussein has been to Denmark.
I've been to Denmark.
Schiphol.
Okay. All right. So a few people have been to Denmark. It's a great little country, but it's tiny, right? There's only 5.5 million people who speak Danish in the world. So it was, and what used to be the case, now less so, but we used to have this thing called the Jantelov in Denmark. Does anyone know what the Jantelov is? No? So the Jantelov is this unwritten law that you should not think too highly of yourself, and you should not try to stick your head out, because then we're going to knock it down. Just try to blend in, be average, be like everyone else. Don't try to stick out too much. And as you might imagine, as somebody who has a strong entrepreneurial drive, that's not a great context to be in. So throughout sort of middle school, high school, and college, I constantly bumped into this expectation from other people that I should try to blend in and be more average. And I took initiative to do too many different things, and it was a bit of a pain. So while I was studying for my master's degree in engineering, in college, I started 2 small businesses as an undergrad, actually. One of those companies crashed and burned, and I'll send you a video. You can check out that story. But essentially, I picked the wrong co-founder. So once we got the business up and running, he took all the money and screwed me over. So I learned the hard way that when you're picking a co-founder, you need to find people who have a high level of integrity. And not just fall in love with this idea of becoming an entrepreneur and then work with anyone who you might come across. So and the other company I started was sort of moderately successful, and I sold my share in that business when I decided in 2010 that I wanted to learn more about building scalable, high impact companies. So I essentially packed my bags and moved to San Francisco. I took this position as a clean tech advisor at the Danish Innovation Center, sort of as an intern, helping large Danish clean tech companies get connections in the Bay Area. While I was also pursuing my master's in engineering, I worked at Vestas Wind Systems, the largest wind turbine company in the world, and I worked in their global research department on innovation management projects. So I've had some experience. Well, that's pretty much my only experience working sort of as an employee inside a large company. After that, I quickly decided that I wanted to sort of pursue my own projects. I wanted to choose who I want to work with. I wanted to pick what kind of problems I was passionate about solving and working on those. I wanted to decide and choose my own hours, and essentially also, reap the benefits of my hard work. So if things go well, you make a lot of money. If things don't go so well, you don't get a paycheck. And that's the hard reality as an entrepreneur. I like this saying that entrepreneurs do for a few years what most people won't, so that they can live the rest of their lives like most people don't, right? So you have this option of putting in the work, and it's going to be an intense amount of work, and there's no guarantee that you're going to be successful, but you believe in this project and you work night and day, 80, 100-hour weeks for a while. And then at some point you build up this asset, some type of product that you can now monetize for years to come, or maybe you end up selling your business. And at that point you sort of earn your freedom, right? It's funny, I'm reading this book to my son right now by a former Navy SEAL called The Warrior Kid. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is how discipline equals freedom, right? Freedom to do whatever you want, freedom to, pursue whatever projects, financial freedom, and time freedom, right? So for me, I've discovered, also from spending a lot of time here in Silicon Valley, that there are a lot of really wealthy, super miserable people. So one of the things I always focus on in these career conversations is that don't just optimize to become money rich. Also focus on becoming time rich, because at the end of the day, there are so many people who are multi-millionaires and they don't know what to do with their time. They don't know how to have fun. They don't know how to enjoy life. They don't have any friends around because all they do is work all the time. And there will always be somebody with a bigger yacht, right? There's always somebody with a nicer car, bigger house, and so on. So I'm definitely not in the top 100 or top 1,000 of the most wealthiest people in Silicon Valley, but I'm probably one of the most time wealthy people in the Bay Area, because I try to optimize for time. That's of course a personal choice, whatever you find meaningful and exciting, whatever you want to do in your life. But I think it's just a good question to ask yourself, what is the business model of you? Right, so we talk a lot about building a business model for a startup, but another sort of session that I enjoy running is this a symbol. How many of you are familiar with business model canvas? So you filled one of those out? Not that many. Okay, so the business model canvas was popularized about 8-10 years ago, I think, at this point, with this idea that it's a waste of time to write a long business plan the second you have a new business idea. Instead, what you should do is map out. It was actually by this guy, Alex Osterwalder, who wrote this book called Business Model Generation, where he introduces the business model canvas, this one-page overview of your entire business model. So you have a complete overview of who are the customers you're serving, what is the, let me just find this somewhere else. I'll throw it on the Miro board for you to check out. But essentially, it's a way to map out all the essential aspects of your business model. And then shortly afterwards, there's this group of people who came up with another framework called Business Model U. And if you Google Business Model U, put in the chat, you will be able to find a canvas that, similarly to the business model canvas, actually helps you map out the core elements for you as an individual. And it helps you think about how can you structure your life and be proactive about making some choices so that you end up living the type of life you want to live, and not just get caught up in the rat race and working 9-to-5 type jobs and having a boss that you don't really enjoy working for and colleagues who are kind of boring, and then but now you're stuck with a mortgage and car payments and family and all that stuff. So that's the last thing I wish for people. So instead, making proactive choices and figuring out, well, I can probably not live the life I want to do right now today, but trying to sort of strive for that and figuring out, well, what is actually important for me going forward. So I guess that's my 2 cents. So today I live right north of San Francisco in a place called Marin County, in a small town called Mill Valley, where they invented mountain biking. It's right next to Mount Tam. So the very beautiful nature. It's been horrible the last 2.5 weeks with the terrible air quality. Do you still have bad air in Phoenix now? Oh, that sucks. So today was the first day it cleared. So there's hope, my friends. It's gonna clear. Today was the first time, so I was out running on the trails this morning for the first time in 3 weeks, and really excited to get out more. And certainly also to be able to have I have 2 boys, a 2-year-old and 5-year-old. And it's very exciting to be able to kick them out of the house and burn off some of that energy throughout the day. So I live here in the Bay Area, which is a great place to be as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, because you can tap into sort of this exciting ecosystem for entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco. You can find, tons of people who want to change the world, and every dinner conversation is about what new startups people have launched and social impact projects and whatnot. But I enjoy also living in a smaller town, so I can tap out of all that craziness sometimes and go back to being closer to nature. So I'm an entrepreneur. I run a company called Startup Experience, which is an entrepreneurship education company where I work with startup accelerators, large corporations, and universities, colleges, sometimes high schools around the world. I've traveled to 25 countries, over 25 countries, to run these in-person boot camps. So that was a fun excuse for me to travel around to some interesting places, anywhere from Papua New Guinea, working with rural mushroom farmers, to Australia, to Russia, to a lot of places in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, Costa Rica, a lot of places in Mexico. And also, is there anywhere from sort of teaching high-tech entrepreneurship at Thunderbird or Stanford University or Johns Hopkins to working with, last summer I traveled to a refugee camp in Kenya called Kakuma Refugee Camp, where I was working with a large group of refugee entrepreneurs. And the exciting thing about entrepreneurship is that the fundamental principles are universally applicable. It doesn't matter if you're a graduate student at Thunderbird School of Global Management, or you're a refugee living in Kenya, or a medicine or sort of medtech student in Russia. The process of defining a problem you want to solve, coming up with an idea, building a business model, testing that business model, raising funding, incorporating and scaling up the business, that's the same. And it's also the same for corporate innovators. So I mentioned I work with a number of large companies, and I'll shut up soon now and dive into Q&A. But over the past couple of years, there's been an increasing sort of request from large companies like Twitter, Intel, Lego, Novo Nordisk in the pharmaceutical industry. And over the past couple of weeks, I worked with Johnson & Johnson and a large company in the US called McCormick that produces spices. And they're interested in this topic of corporate entrepreneurship. Like, they're asking me, it's like, Henrik, you need to come and help make my employees more entrepreneurial, right? Because they're asking for permission instead of just getting shit done. And we don't have time for that. So that's just to sort of emphasize the importance of learning about entrepreneurship, because even in large corporations, they are looking for people like you who have this innovative entrepreneurial mindset and attitude, who can just, get stuff done fast, experiment with new things, try things out, not always ask for permission. And that is also on the career advice front. We had actually a pretty cool webinar on the topic of corporate entrepreneurship with some T-Bird alums a few weeks ago with a vice president at MasterCard. His name is Matt. And one of his pieces of advice was like, nobody's going to promote you for doing your job, right? For doing the base level of what's expected from you and living up to your KPIs. What's going to get you promoted and get you seen by the executive teams is when you go above and beyond. And I think having some of that entrepreneurial attitude can definitely help you with some of that. So part-time with Thunderbird, part-time as a founder of Startup Experience, part-time with an innovation agency called Innovators Agency. And also then I'm a partner in a venture capital firm called Mentors Fund, where we invest in early stage companies. So now I'm also on the other side of the table investing in early stage businesses. So that's a bit on sort of my background and the worlds I try to navigate at this point. And as you can see, like, being an entrepreneur, I tend to just get involved with too many things at once. And I think my current sort of resume on LinkedIn is a good reflection of that I'm sort of part-time in a gazillion different things. But yeah, that's not for everyone. I enjoy that. It's also very confusing and it's hard to focus sometimes, but it's fun to have a lot of balls up in the air at the same time. So with that in mind, lots of topics we can dive into related to all the things I sort of presented. Just keen to hear sort of where are you at? What are some of the things that are challenging for you in terms of looking at your career? And what topics would you like to discuss today?
Professor.
Hussein.
Oh, I was just going to say Hussein had a question, but then also we already have some questions on the Miro board. So
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Very good. Hussein, go ahead.
Yes, good presentation. One thing, what your website, and the other thing, do we need some assistant, and how we choose our assistant?
How, can you clarify that question?
I mean, such clerical jobs.
What are critical jobs?
Yeah, I mean, such assistant, we need some kind of communication, some kind of paperwork. So do you think it's powerful to do it by yourself or get somebody assisting to you?
When you're starting a new business, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, good question. Should you have a co-founder or should you be a solopreneur? And that's one of the questions we also discuss in the course, because I actually, leave it up to the students whether they want to go through the process solo or with a co-founder. And if we look at the statistics, most of the successful, pretty much all of successful startups have a founding team. It is very difficult to do it as a solopreneur all by yourself, just because speed is of paramount importance. And you're going to get run over by another team of people who can just execute so much faster. With that in mind, though, and also because in a startup team, you typically need a set of skills, and you need complementary skills in that startup team. So I usually ask people when they're finding co-founders that you need to have a hacker, a hustler, and an artist in your team. Because, right? And ideally, you also need as much gender diversity and diversity in terms of experience and so on, and cultural diversity. But with that in mind, you can certainly start a business on your own. And it also depends on what type of business you're starting. Actually, are you starting a high-growth startup where you're going to raise funding from investors? Or are you starting more of a lifestyle business such as a small consultancy or an accounting business, or you're going to be a lawyer or something like that? Because those types of businesses can work very well by yourself. But if you want to build a product and have some kind of technology solution, it's just rarely possible to do that all by yourself. You usually need somebody to manage sales and customer interactions. You need another person to manage the product side, and you need a third person to manage operations. So doing all that all by yourself is difficult. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Okay. Okay, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, or I'm gonna go on the Miro board here and check out some of these good questions here too. You can vote on these. I can see which ones are most important. Money strategy as an entrepreneur. Who answered that question? Can you clarify a bit more about what you mean? Is that in terms of fundraising, or is that how to preserve capital, or? Nobody wants to admit who they asked this question. It's a good question. So a few things on that. In a startup team, there's a lot of talk about the lean startup movement. So if you've never heard anything about lean like the startups and how to build startups, lean startup, I think it's called The Lean Startup, is a good book to check out. There's also an article by Steve Blank called How the Lean Startup Changes Everything. Let me just see, I'll find it here. Boom, here we go. Here's a good article to check out. It talks about how the lean startup changes everything. And essentially with this idea that as a newly formed startup team, you have limited resources, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of manpower, and you want to be able to prove that your business model works. One of the most important things to realize as a first-time founder is that you should not just go ahead and build whatever product you have in your head, right? Your vision for your company probably does not match reality. So you need to test it before you build it. That's a very important lesson to learn. Every year, millions of large companies and startups, they end up building products no one wants. And you don't want to do that. You want to test it before you build it. Yesterday in class, we discussed how a former student of mine had this idea for a product, was able to raise $140,000 from family, friends. And then he asked me to come on as an advisor, and it's like, well, I'll help you out, but you need to test this idea before you go ahead and build it. He has this idea for an app, right? And he was like, yeah, but I already got the money. So, and I found this dev team up in UC Berkeley that can help me build it. So I'm just going to build it, and then we'll get customers. And like, all right, well, I'm out then, because that's not how a startup works. So he spent $80,000 building the first version of his app, and had a beautiful app, and it worked, and it was great. And then he started doing what we call customer development, where you go out and talk to customers. And in this case, he was trying to onboard people to get them to sign up. And only then he realized that he had spent a ton of money building all the wrong features, that his revenue model was not going to work because people were not going to pay the amount of money he anticipated, and so on. And essentially, at the end of the day, he was just stuck with this shitty app that no one wanted to use. And that happens a lot. So the lean startup is about how you want to test your idea before you build it. And today there is a systematic approach on how to do that. And the best way to learn about this is to sign up for Building a Global Startup with Thunderbird. So I hope I'll see some of you in class and someone later. A little bit of plug here. Where we go through this whole process of actually, coming up with an idea, going out, doing customer interviews, and then you launch a landing page, and you start getting traffic to that. You see what customers think about your product, and you go through these small, effective experiments before you end up building the final product. All right, so money preservation. Yes, you want to preserve money and stay lean to keep your burn rate, the amount of money you spend every month, as low as possible. So that's why you want to compensate people with equity in your startup instead, or stock options, instead of giving them high salaries, right? In a startup, you need to keep your salary level really low. And what I recommend is that you try to bootstrap your business for the first sort of 12 to 18 months, right? So you need to have 12 months of savings, so you don't need to worry about paying rent next month, or be able to afford ramen and oatmeal, right? And that's pretty much all you need, and electricity and good Wi-Fi, and then you can get started. But you want to preserve the cash for as long as possible, because chances are that it's going to take longer for you to get to what we call product market fit, where you have found the product people want to pay for, than what you expect. So in terms of money management, spend as little as possible for as long as possible. And also, if you can wait to raise money until you have some kind of proof of concept, you're going to be able to get a much better valuation for your business. So you get more money without giving too much equity up in the business. All right, I want to get another live question here. And I see we have quite a few people. There must be someone here who hopefully has a question, so I can make this session as relevant as possible. What do you want to talk about?
I'll ask a question.
Excellent.
So I put it on the Miro board, but I guess I'll ask here too. So what would you tell somebody who doesn't think that they're creative, or doesn't think they can come up with a good startup idea, or is just really timid about the whole idea because they just don't feel like they know what to do, they don't know how to do it?
Yes. Well, there has been a lot of hype around entrepreneurship lately. So I might sort of, the counter perspective to what I shared initially, that everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. What I mean by that is everyone needs to have an entrepreneurial mindset and learn the tools and tactics to be an effective problem solver. Not everyone should go out and start their own business right away, because it's not a career path that's for everyone. It is highly unpredictable. There's a high chance of failure, and you might not get paid for a very long time. So I think most people prefer a more predictable career path where they actually get paid a salary and benefits and all that good stuff, right? Instead of living in your mom's basement for the next 3 years and not really making any money while you see all your friends who are graduating, getting great jobs, buying nice cars and fancy apartments and all that stuff. The downside of that, right? If you want to start a business, you need to work for it for a while, right? And it's not as glorious as what most people think. We always hear these fantastic stories about, billion-dollar startups, and it looks like an overnight success. But reality is that all of these companies that it took a long time, and there was a lot of struggle, a lot of hardship, and most of these founders that are successful now had a number of failures before they were successful. So it's a different path. So just to say, like, not all of you should go out and, I have to be an entrepreneur and start my own business. But so to your question, Cher, on how to get good ideas, I think that the first thing to learn is to become a good observer of problems, right? So entrepreneurs are different from most people in the sense that they don't just accept status quo. Like, they see a problem and they actually want to go solve it. Most people see all these problems we have in society and in their own life, and they just accept it. They accept that, the washing machine is broken, or that the door is kind of hard to open, like the small things too. They accept that it's a pain to commute to work every day, or it's frustrating to have these inefficient work procedures, but they don't speak up. They don't do anything. They just live with it, right? But that's where I think entrepreneurs are a little different. They have the confidence, the entrepreneurial confidence, to do something about it, to say, like, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to find a solution for that. And sometimes you end up finding a problem that a lot of people have. And if you can find a problem that a lot of people have and you end up coming up with a solution, you can probably find a way to monetize that. So I always talk about how the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity, right? So start looking at problems all around you in your own life, in your own community. It's always easier as an entrepreneur to solve a problem that you have yourself, right? That's how the Airbnb founders were struggling to make money, because their landlord has just increased the rent in their apartment and they had this extra space on the floor. So why don't we pump up an air mattress and have somebody come stay here? And there was like air, bed, and breakfast, right? So we'll make breakfast for these people and they can stay on an air mattress, and we can charge them $80 a night for a few nights, and then we can pay rent. Maybe there are other people who have this problem too, right? And the same with, like, all these other startups. Most of the startups, the people have this problem themselves, and then they decide to do something about it and productize it and find a way to sell it to other people as well. So yes, you can sit and you can brainstorm by yourself, but I think the first step is really to what I call painstorming. And I have that on the Miro board too. Instead of brainstorming to start with, start by running a painstorming session. And for those of you who can't see the Miro board, it looks like this, right? So write down what problems you would be passionate about solving with your company, right? What are the pain points in your life? And things like, poverty in the world. That's a big problem. You want to be more specific, like where in the world and what type of poverty and what aspect of poverty do you want to address? Is it sanitation? Is it living opportunities? Is it job opportunities? Is it education? Is it, connectedness? Is it mentoring? Like, try to be specific about the type of problem that you want to solve, because as an entrepreneur, you can't solve something like poverty in the world. You can, or, pollution, right? Or political instability or corruption. Like, it's just too broad. You need to find a very well-defined niche that you can target. What is the one problem that you want to solve for this one group of people that you can solve with this one specific product or feature? And then you start with that. And if you do that well, you can branch out to solving multiple different problems for multiple different types of people. And that will ultimately help you out. Okay, I think it was Avery, and I saw your question, Brijard, or Bryce, as well on failure. We could definitely talk about that. But Avery.
Professor, hi, it's a privilege to attend your session. I'm curious if you do any work with the Copenhagen Consensus in the spirit of problem solving.
I have not.
Okay, thank you.
Tell me more about that.
Well, you may be familiar with Professor Lomborg. He's pretty adversarial in terms of climate change. He has a contrarian view on the priority. And I was just curious as a Dane if you did any work with them, as they seem to be trying to tackle some of the most significant problems.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, send me an email about it. I'd love to learn more about their work. Have you? Are you in touch with them, or are you just?
Oh, not at all. I'm not that important. I'm not that VIP. But, he seems to be doing very interesting research that's a little bit counter to what is the mainstream narrative.
Oh, he totally does. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not necessarily sure I sort of agree with that perspective. There are a couple of other sort of climate perspectives that I follow more and that I support. But nonetheless, he has some interesting points with some of the statistics that he's able to pull out that makes you consider what efforts might be the best for humanity to focus on right now from an impact perspective. But it's also very dangerous to have somebody like him who is a scientist and a very knowledgeable on climate change, come up with these contrarian views, because that's stuff that our current government can use to propaganda that the environment is not changing or the climate is not changing. So yeah, but I'll be happy to check it out. Yeah, all right. Other questions, Simon?
Hi, Professor. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. My question has to do with building a team through equity distribution. For that, is a lawyer required or necessary, and how much might that cost to sort of draft a proposal? To draft a co-founder agreement with equity distribution? Yeah. Are you pre-funding? Yes. Yes. So if you haven't yet raised any funding, you don't need to solidify your cap table just yet. So in a startup, you have a cap table, the capital table that essentially describes how the equity is just distributed amongst the various shareholders, right? And there's some excellent sort of graphics we can dive into if you're interested in sort of understanding this split. Let me just see here. I think I have a link that's good for that. But my point is, if you haven't yet raised any funding, there's an excellent equity distribution framework called Slicing Pie that works really well to, at least initially, it's a short, a very quick sort of read book called Slicing Pie. And then on the website, they provide you with a downloadable, essentially an Excel sheet for equity distribution. But the cool thing about the Slicing Pie framework is that it's it will sort of change over time based on who puts in the time to work on the startup. So what you agree on initially, maybe one of the founders had the idea, right? And you might think, oh, then that person has to get 40% equity because she brought the idea. Well, no, the idea is worthless. That's another very important thing to understand in the world of startups. Ideas are worthless. What matters is execution, right? So that founder who has, the idea, brings the idea to the table, maybe gets 5 percentage points at the most for bringing the idea, depending on how much this person has worked on the idea already. But you don't get a ton of extra, equity just for bringing the idea, because really, there is no value today. The value is what we're going to create over the next 4 to 5 to 6 years. So Slicing Pie will help you agree on the initial distribution. Say, okay, we're like 5 founders. We all want to have 20%, but Garrett brought the idea, so he's going to get an extra, 3% for that, and then we distribute the rest, right, to start with. But then what you say is like, it's actually based on who brings value to the team. And then you can say, well, we're going to reward certain things. For example, we're going to reward a bit of equity to the person who connects us with the anchor investor, right? So the first who brings the money to the team, right? Or maybe somebody puts in their own capital and they have to be rewarded for that. And you can look at, well, what is your time worth? So that's another way to look at, well, if somebody might be pretty junior, just fresh out of college, and you have another member of the team who's a much more senior person who can add more value relative to this more junior person, you can find a way to say, well, how much is their time worth? And then you track the amount of hours putting into this startup, and then you distribute the equity based on some of those different factors. So I like the way that this is sort of a more flexible framework, because what you typically happens is that you agree on an equity split on day one, but then it turns out not every founder is going to be equally motivated. And if you don't have a way to then change the equity distribution based on amount of time and energy you put into the project, the people who are driving everything gets very frustrated. I had this happen with my second company. As a fourth semester undergrad, we started a small consulting business, and we were 5 co-founders. We had 25% each, and we put that down on paper on day one. All right, 25% each, boom. But then very quickly what happened was that, you know, one of the founders got a new girlfriend, and he was all, you know, distracted with that. And somebody else was just focused on school and didn't really pay attention to the startup. But now it was too late, right? It was really hard to renegotiate those equity percentages. So what you do is that initially you can have slicing pie framework. And then once you raise some funding, if you want that, you need to solidify the cap table, but you still don't give out that equity on day one. You put up what's called a vesting schedule. And this is something that's very important to understand, because it's a very expensive mistake to make. It's called vesting schedule, right? And that means that you don't get your equity on day one, you earn it over a 4-year period. So you have a 4-year vesting schedule. So if you are to be awarded with 20% equity, and over a 4-year period, you will gradually earn that equity. After 1 year, you now have 5%. And you cannot lose those 5%. Those are yours. You can maybe sell it back to the company if you leave, but if you get kicked out, you still have your 5%. But if you leave after 1 year, you leave with only 5%, and the remaining 15% go back to the company. So this is a way to incentivize everyone to stay in the company, because it takes time to build a business. It takes time to add that value. It doesn't make any sense to give out that equity on day one. So have a vesting schedule with a 4-year vesting schedule and a 1-year cliff. And the 1-year cliff says that if you leave or are kicked out before the 1-year mark, you leave with nothing. So that's a great way to protect your business from giving up equity to employees who just get hired, or to some co-founder who doesn't work out. So 1-year cliff, 4-year vesting schedule. And my number one advice would be find a good startup lawyer who can help you frame that. There are lots of great templates on co-founder agreements and things like that. I put together a bunch of resources on startupexperience.com/resources. You can start there. There you'll find a bunch of good stuff. And if you search just like template co-founder agreement, you will find documents that helps you figure out what are the important discussion topics we need to discuss as a co-founding team in terms of roles, responsibility, time commitment, equity structure, what decision-making process, all that stuff. So it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it's really good to have those conversations up front, because right now everything is rosy and it's easy. Once you start actually having money on the table, it's a lot harder to have those conversations. All righty. Sana.
Hello, Professor. Thank you so much for the session. And before I ask my question, thank you for introducing me to Miro. It is my new favorite tool to play around now. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. You're welcome.
My question is, how do you avoid the long trial and error phase you go through? So let's say you have the happy problem of having multiple ideas.
Yeah.
And then how do you, I'm looking for an inside view, because you've done so much and you've obviously had this, you went through this process, right? Where you have few ideas and you don't know which one to pick or where to start. So any way to shorten that painful time of working on the wrong thing?
Well, you want to get really good at running experiments, right? And then first you want to try to rank those ideas somehow and figure out which one are you, and there are a couple different ways of doing that. Of course, you can look at, there has to be a big market, right? Mm-hmm. If there's not a big market, there's not a big opportunity. No matter how great of a product you build, if the total addressable market is $5 million, it's just never going to be a big company, right? You can build the best product in the world, but if you're only servicing wheelchair users with Alzheimer's who also are left-handed and like to play Tetris, it's going to be a fairly limited, audience, and you're just not going to be able to build a big business around that. So it has to be a big market, and then it has to ideally also be a problem that you're truly excited about solving, right? Something that is meaningful to you, because reality is, at some point it's going to get rough, and you're going to, everyone around you is going to tell you, stop working on this stupid startup, get a real job, right? And at that point, you need to be able to find that inner motivation to work on this and to keep going, to not take no for an answer, to overcome those obstacles and just make it happen. And the thing that I found drive me in those moments is that you got to be excited about what you're building, and excited ideally also about the customer you're servicing. Right? So if you don't want to interact with this type of customer, it's also going to be a drag. There was this Danish startup that desperately tried to get me on board to help them with their company that actually was really promising. And it was a company that was working in sort of freight management, freight forwarding. So they had a digital tool to help freight forwarders optimize their workflow. Right? And it was great. They had good traction. There's lots of potential in the US, and I could essentially take this and bring it to the US. And then I spent a couple of weeks talking to truck drivers and trucking companies and freight forwarders. And I lost all motivation. I did not find these customers very interesting. And it was just like trying to find a way to save these people a bit of time. And it just didn't excite me. So that's another criteria. It has to be something that excites you, that gets you up in the morning and wants you to go do this. And then I think most importantly, those are important, but then after that, if you still have a drawer full of ideas and you select sort of the top 5 ideas that you can't choose between, then test them, right? Say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to find 20 people who have the problem I think they have. Right? And you're going to interview them, and you're going to learn about customer interviewing, and you're going to check out this resource section on how to interview people, and you're going to learn how to go out and actually do that. And after 20 interviews, you should start to see a pattern. And you get a ton of insights. You learn what people really care about, and it might be a different problem than what you anticipated. Or maybe you find out this is actually not a problem at all. Nobody really cares. Or there's a great solution on the market already that's just launched, and people are just using that. Or you might find out that you have to pivot somehow. Either you talk to these people and they all have a different problem, and then you just pivot and say, okay, well, then I'm going to solve this problem for these people. But maybe you end up instead finding out that this problem is indeed a problem, but not for the type of people you thought were your customers. You need to make a customer segment pivot and focus on a different group of people that actually have this problem you want to solve. But by running these like fast and cheap experiments, interviewing is number 1. Then afterwards, you start learning about other minimum viable product experiments. Again, check out Lean Startup, check out the resource section here, take the course on building a global startup. And you will learn how to run these MVPs, where you can try to sell it before you build it. You can try to launch a landing page. You can try to do what we call a concierge MVP. There's another book that I recommend called Testing Business Ideas. That describes 44 different experiments you can run to get real insights from customers. And these can be done over a course of a week or 2. And now you have data to help you make these decisions instead of just your gut feeling, which is a lot better.
That is super helpful. Thank you so much. I think I needed to hear that, because passion is so easy to follow, right? But you don't want to hear that there's no market for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I didn't want to hear that, but thank you for
follow your
that.
passion. Well, it's great. Well, if there's no market, you can follow your passion all you want. You're not going to be very successful. So you need to sort of find that intersection, right, between, your passion, your skills, and a real problem in the world, right? That people have, right? So yeah, there has to be a need for whatever solution.
Thank you.
All right, Bryce, question.
Yes, Professor. So you mentioned a while ago that not everyone is into entrepreneurship, but what if, let's say, I decided to pursue entrepreneurship and then I fail? How am I going to deal with that? And how many failures do I need, to learn from in order to become successful in my chosen field of expertise?
Yeah. Well, you want to give yourself a time frame to test this idea, right? So if you have an idea and you've done your market research, you've done your competitive analysis, and you see that there is a gap in the market, and there's a sizable, market that you can go after here who would have this problem that you want to solve, and then be systematic about start testing all the different assumptions. So after you map out your business model on this pre-structured canvas, right? So if you go to startupexperience.com/resources, where did I put that link? Yeah, so here you can find a bunch of good stuff. There's some slide decks and stuff, but here you can find these templates that I've created, and you want to use this one. And then you can see here are a couple different tools that you can use to sort of get started. The first one here is the define template, where you need to figure out, okay, you can brainstorm different problems you want to solve, different customer segments, and then you can start mapping out ideas. You can create a customer persona. So here you start getting some additional details on like how big is the total available market, the amount of customers and that you might target, and revenue potential if you sell your product to all those people. Service available market and serviceable obtainable market. So TAM, SAM, SUM is a good sort of back of a napkin market size calculation. You define your customer segment, and then once you've done that, you map out your idea on this pre-structured canvas that I've created called the startup canvas, which is a derivative version of the business model canvas. But here you have a one-page business plan, essentially. So in this one piece of paper, you have a description of what is the problem you're solving, who are your customers, what is your solution, how is it unique, what are your costs for getting started, how are you going to make money, right? But when you realize all you have here is a set of guesses, right? It's just packed with assumptions that you need to test. So initially in the startup journey, everything is uncertain. And my favorite definition of a startup is that a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So this is borrowed from Steve Blank, who's one of the initial sort of godfathers of the lean startup movement. Eric Ries, who wrote the Lean Startup, says a startup is a human organization designed to essentially operate in environments of extreme uncertainty, or build a company in extreme uncertainty. Everything is uncertain. And your job as an entrepreneur is to eliminate uncertainty through validated learning. So you're running a series of these experiments to quickly figure out, is this a real problem? Are there a lot of customers who experience this problem? But that's not enough, right? If for you to have a business, you need to have people who have the problem, they realize they have the problem, and they're actively looking for a solution, right? Because if they haven't realized that there are lots of obese people who don't want to lose weight, right? You can't target those people because they're not going to click on your ads. They're not going to buy your product, right? So they need to have the problem, know they have a problem, and be interested in a new solution for that. So that's the process. Well, so how long should you take? I would say 6 months, right? But even like in 3 months, you should be able to test whether this idea has some legs. If you don't start seeing a pattern after 3 months, you need to reconsider what you're doing, and change, pivot somehow, right? Not that you need to have $1 million in revenue after 3 months, but things have to start to look in the right direction, right? You should have been able to manually maybe deliver this product or service to your customers and get good feedback on that, and start constantly, you're setting up a number of metrics. It's called innovation accounting. So you're not getting any real revenue yet. So you need to measure your progress in a different way. So you set up learning metrics, like how many customers are you interacting with? How many people visit your website? How many reach out to you? And as you run these small experiments and you incrementally improve your website, improve the sign-up forms, improve the product features, the way you pitch it, over time, you should be getting better and you should be getting more and more positive feedback. But even then, you might fail with your first company. And then the golden rule is failing faster is failing cheaper. So the faster you can realize that you're working on a stupid idea that nobody wants to purchase, the faster you can move on to working on a product that actually has real potential. So that is a good rule of thumb, that just look at yourself essentially not as somebody who's trying to build this company into a successful company. Try to look at yourself as somebody who is challenged with a way to shoot down this idea, right? That you need to really put it through the test. And although you are in love with your little precious idea and you think it's going to be great, you need to take a real look at it from the outside and hear what customers have to say. But then, don't be discouraged if you fail with your business. But hopefully you haven't spent 2 years building a product in your garage and then you show it to the world and realize that nobody wants to buy it. Hopefully you've applied the lean startup method, so you've tested all your assumptions quickly and effectively without spending too much money, and then you fail after a month. And then you move on to doing something else. Then you can run a lot more experiments. And that's one of the things we look at as investors as well when we try to evaluate new startup teams, is that we look at speed, right? What is the speed in which this company can operate, can create new experiments and just run these iterations? Because at the end of the day, that's really what you need. Move fast and break things.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to say thank you so much, Professor. And I think those are great last words to end on. Move fast and break things. Before I close us out, I do just want to, if everyone can please turn their camera on if you are in an area that you can or that you look okay, because I do want a screenshot, because I want to see, we have 42 beautiful faces on here. So if you can turn your cameras on, I'm going to count to 3, 2 times, and we'll go from there. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, like startup? Or do you have some kind of hand? What is the hand sign for Thunderbird? I forgot. Is that it, the T?
And yeah, one more. 1, 2, 3. Awesome, perfect. So I went ahead and put a link in the chat for a survey, if you can just go ahead and fill that out. And I just wanted to say, we did this last semester, like Helen said, and this is the most people we've ever had. We had 46 people on this call, which means other than Professor Scheel, Helen, and I, we had 43 of you. And so that's incredible. I see a lot of second years, but I see mostly first years. So thank you so much for the perfect first session of the Faculty Career Impact Program. I want to let you know on the 28th, we're going to have Professor Inkpen. And he's an awesome professor as well. I had him for strategy in the spring. So whether you're interested in strategy or not, definitely come to his session. In October, we're going to have Professor Scheel's wife, Professor Huang. And so she'll be here as well. And she is an investor. So you'll get to hear more about that. She's an entrepreneur too. And then we'll have Professor Edens as well in October. And he has one of the most incredible backgrounds I have ever heard of. He taught innovation last semester, and he's worked for just about everyone you can imagine. So definitely keep checking these out on Handshake. I'll keep sending you messages. Like I said, you'll get tired of seeing my name. But thank you so much for coming. This has been great. And if we can give Professor Scheel a round of applause, that would be amazing.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure talking to you. And I look forward to seeing you out in the startup world. All right. Bye, everyone.